Hit it, hit it.
All right, so one of the beginner blocks of this blanket is the single crochet rib. It's super easy. It's a great one to jump into. It actually might be a really good first one to try out. You're going to be using front post and back post stitches for this block. If you need a refresher on that, you can find those right over there at the beginner basics videos. I have taken the time to show you how to do all of that stuff, but I'm going to show you a quick reference on how to do it right here. So let's take a look at the actual blanket to see what you're going to be working on. If we look at this here, you can see that we have a lot of dimension with these stitches going on, and that's because we have actually worked the stitch from the row above into the post stitch of the row below. So by doing that, we've created a nice texture to that stitch. If I were to flip this over, you can see I get the same texture on the back side as well. So this is a great reversible stitch. It is perfect for scarves or the brim of a hat or right here into the block on this blanket. It's just a lot of fun to add into. So let's jump in and get started on that. I'm going to set this forward. I'm using Red Heart with Love yarn. It's a worsted Aran weight yarn, kind of between the two, I think, and a 6mm crochet hook. I'm beginning with a slip knot right on my hook. If you need a refresher on that, again, the beginner basics is a great place to look at the chain and the slip knot. Over here, the stitch pattern that we're going to use is the single crochet rib, and we're going to be working on the in-class block, meaning we're going to chain 22. For the actual blanket, you would chain a different amount if you're going to make a larger block for the size of the blanket, but for this example, we're going to chain 22. There are written instructions right here, which you can follow along with, or the chart. Now, if I were to follow along with the chart and I counted all these oval stitches, I would count that there are 22. My chart in this pattern directly coincide with the in-class block chain amounts, so that way you can have a very good visual of what it is you're creating. You can see that the numbers on either side, that gives you the clue of how you're going to read the chart, which side you start on first. Since the number 1 is over here, we would start reading the chart from this side and go this way, and then we would snake up and read the chart like that. Since this is the first square of this blanket, or the very beginner kind of pattern, we're going to begin, and we're going to work mainly with the words this time around. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chain 22. And 4, 5, 6. Do you guys ever yell at your kids and think to yourself, okay, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, you're counting along as you're, reprimanding them for whatever reason. You go 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So you're going along, and as you're talking, you're counting. Happens to me all the time. So I have 22 chains right there, and I can see row 1, it's WS, is wrong side. Says skip 3 chains, and that's going to count as 1 double crochet. So that's a clue to me that I'm going to want to put my marker into my chain that's right underneath my hook, because the top of that chain will be the 3rd chain of the turning chain. So that'll be the end of my row, okay? So it says counts as 1 double crochet in the next chain, and each chain to the end. So this is how easy this first row is. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and we're coming here to the 4th chain from hook, and we're going to put a double crochet. The entire first row of this rib stitch pattern, single rib stitch pattern, is just doing double crochets. All right? So I've been calling it a single crochet rib, but I think that might be a little confusing because it's not using single crochets, we're using double crochets, but it's a singular rib. So that's why I put singular in there. Maybe if it confuses you a little bit, you want to call it a double crochet rib, you absolutely can. You can call it whatever you want. As long as you get the process down on how to complete this, that's the main goal here. That's what we want to do. Many times in the crochet industry, we try to specialize or standardize a lot of the stitch patterns, but more often than not, what might be a wattle stitch one place might be a waffle stitch someplace else, and it might just be a single double somewhere else. You never know. So don't always just go by the name of the stitch pattern, because there are times that those are changed on a whim by the designer, by the publisher, whoever it may be. So that's just a little tip right here to you. So for this one, if you wanted to call it a double ribbed crochet, you absolutely could. You could call it whatever you want. Essentially, the main point is that we want to get ribbing, right? All right, so I'm at the very end of those 22 chains. I have done all of my double crochets and I'm ready for row 2. So I like to chain 2 and then turn. There are patterns that write turn and then chain 2, whichever way, doesn't matter. You can start whichever way you want. So this is going to count as a double crochet. But wait, Marley, it's only a chain 2. Why is it only a chain 2? And you've mentioned before that a chain 3 is the same height as a double crochet. Well, there are times when doing a chain 2 actually looks better at the edge than a chain 3. So for this example, we did a chain 2. Now we're going to skip the first stitch. Skip this stitch here because our chain 2 is going to count as a stitch, so we don't want to work into that. And it says do a front post double crochet around the next stitch. So if this is our next stitch, if we were doing just a basic double crochet, we'd be going into there. But because we want to do a front post, we're going to go in from the right side of this post of the stitch and come out the left side of that stitch, right? We yarn over and we want our hook to come back the same path. So when we come back the same path, we create our front post. Now it says we want to do a back post. So we're just alternating the two of these. Going behind my work, coming into the right side and out the left side, yarning over and having my hook repeat that path back. And there I am, and I just complete my double crochet. So right here, the only difference between a front post and a back post is the placement of your hook. And the only difference between a front post or back post double crochet, again, is where you put your hook. You're not going into the top of the stitch, you're putting it into the post of the stitch, or around the post of the stitch is a better way to say it, because you're not actually going into the post of the stitch. I would just follow this all the way to the end of my row, however many stitches you may have or whatnot, you would just keep going along. If you accidentally put 2 front posts side by side or 2 back posts side by side, just back it on up a little bit and correct it. If I set this down, I'm able to already tell, oh look, my front posts are really pulling over here, which is what I want. And if I look over here, my back posts are pulling over there. If you're a knitter, this is very similar to, this would be the knit side, they're pulling over here, and then those would be my recessed pearls that look like knits on my opposite side. That's where you get that really cool ribbed effect. You would carry on down the whole row. In the very last stitch down here, the one we have marked, you're going to put a double crochet. So you do not do a post stitch at the beginning or the end. We keep those as just plain double crochets, and you work the post all the way along. If you were working this in the round, you might change that up a little bit. You might not have a single space where you don't work a stitch. That would be written in the pattern if they want you to do something differently, but I want to point out if you're just doing a block or a square and you want the edges nice and symmetrical and clean and crisp, this is the way you would do it. This is a great pattern to use for a men's scarf or the ribbing of the hat, ribbing around sweaters, anything like that. It's just really good. It's a lot of texture to it, and it just looks really good. Now you know how to do the single crochet rib stitch, or if you wanted to call it a double crochet rib stitch or the single rib stitch, whatever you want to call it, now you know how to make it.